Okay. All right. So welcome to our monthly Lunch and Learn series from University of Alberta Open Journal Publishing. I am Sarah Shaughnessy. I'm the interim Open Publishing and Open Education Librarian, recovering from a cold, as you can hear. And I'm joined by my colleague, Katie Kyler, who is the Open Publishing and Government Information Librarian. So today our topic is considering peer review practices, and we are going to be doing a little bit of a whirlwind because, as usual, the format is a 30-minute kind of overview of a topic while you have your lunch. So we're going to be throwing a lot of content at you and hopefully giving you some new ideas, and then we'll have a few minutes for talking and questions at the end. So Katie, you can move on to the next slide. Okay, so today, right. Okay, so this is the agenda. So I'm going to be talking about challenges. So kind of introducing the topic of peer review and challenges, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. I'll touch briefly on kind of the state of where we are with AI and peer review. Katie will talk a little bit about open peer review and finish up with some thoughts on ethics in the peer review process. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so the challenges that we kind of see in the literature about scholarly peer review are ones I'm sure you're very familiar with. The main challenge being that there's not enough reviewers or people willing to voluntarily offer their review labor for the number of publications happening. And kind of related to that one is the fact that there can be slow turnaround times instead of delays with the process because people are burdened and overworked. There is the lack of diversity amongst reviewers is something that we talk about a little bit, and I'll touch on that today. And then the effectiveness of peer review is sort of a larger issue, and I'm really not going to talk too much about that because I didn't want to kind of get into an existential crisis and stop presenting. But I will talk a bit about efficacy and developing feedback literacy with your reviewers. So hopefully that'll be helpful. So for these challenges, like from an editorial perspective, the main issues tend to be sort of like management of reviewer labor, the time to publication and the overall author experience, and questions of ethics and transparency. Okay, I can go to the next slide, Katie. Yeah, so this was the hardest part of my section to talk about, which is recruitment, because this is sort of a massive issue and it really feels like there's nothing new under the sun to mention here. But I will talk a little bit. I'll make a few humble suggestions, I guess. The first aspect I want to kind of talk about is deepening the pool of your reviewers. So kind of broadening and diversifying your review pool. And I think this kind of intentional, so you could do some intentional outreach that would help to sorry intentional outreach to kind of target some of the underrepresented groups in your reviewer pool and people, those involved with your editorial processes. And this is something that could take time, but the advantages are not only kind of building a larger pool of people, increasing the diversity, but with more people, you can also probably reduce the bias by having more reviewers that are uncompromised by conflict of interest. So you can make sure that you're proceeding kind of in the best way with your reviewers. So you want to think about all manners of barriers and things that make this work kind of more feasible or attractive for a broader range of people. And also kind of thinking about how you can reach out to networks that are beyond your own biases. So when we think about this work, it's sort of like probably starting small and deliberately. And I know if you joined us for the talk we did on EDI and citational justice, we mentioned sort of taking demographic data for folks involved in your editorial processes. So this is something you could do sort of to start thinking about how diverse your reviewer pool is and sort of and tracking it to see how you can grow that. One of the things you could do would be like developing a diversity statement for your journal, or publishing kind of inclusive language guidelines for reviewers that would sort of set a tone. And when you write your position descriptions, you can write them to actively include people from marginalized groups, and you can post them and share them to try to reach these groups directly. So one of the kind of cool tools that I found was the sort of editors of color diversity database. So I'm just going to pop this in the chat because I know it's on the slides, but you don't really have access for that right now. Okay, sorry. And this is kind of a cool database that goes sort of by disciplinary area, and you can find sort of like some subgroups of people that maybe you aren't connected to through that. And then I added a little link to an article about embedding DEIA in peer review processes. And this is advertising the upcoming publication of a toolkit that you'll be able to use. It's not out yet, but I wanted to let you know that it's in production. Okay, and you can change the slide. Okay, and then the second kind of aspect beyond growing your pool of reviewers would maybe be dealing with some of the challenges of identifying potential reviewers for sort of narrower topics, niche topics, or particular subject areas and things like that. So I'm adding this very obvious probably statement about matching journal ranking with research impact of potential reviewers. So this was an article, I included it in the further reading about the relationship that was sort of discovered between, and it's called like a reputational divide, and it's sort of like between the research impact of the reviewers associated with the sort of similar impact, like high impact reviewers work with high impact journals and so forth. So the suggestion here being that if your journal isn't high impact, that it might be a better use of your time to target kind of early career professionals, perhaps that are working and are supported with a good university, just to increase your sort of acceptance rate for your reviewers. Bibliometric analysis may be something that you're not very familiar with, but I'm just throwing this out as a potential idea. It can be used to sort of map citations and subject expertise areas. And I'm thinking, especially if you're using the reference field in OJS to kind of collect your references as part of your metadata, this is something you could do to sort of have a bigger picture view of the interactions and relationships between the authors you're publishing and who they are citing. And it could really help you kind of see where experts in particular niche areas lie. And then I'm just mentioning the existence of some proprietary AI tools, and I'll talk a little bit more about AI at the end, but just to say sort of this is one area where AI has been pretty successful in helping locate. So within, I know that Claravit has like the Web of Science review locator, and Elsevier has one too. So they would sort of be able to, it would do a similar sort of analysis of going through all the citations to pull out sort of subject author expertise and stuff like that. So this is not something that exists to my knowledge for OJS. It doesn't exist yet, and I haven't heard anything about it in the works, but I'm kind of thinking if this is something that people are using, maybe down the line, that could be a really cool tool for our community to see develop. Okay, next slide, Katie, thanks. Yeah, so I put recognition for authors in the retention kind of category, the problem of reviewer retention. I think because this is really one of the ways that we can make the experience gratifying for authors. So there was IOP published this research motivations report in 2020, and they found that feedback was actually the greatest recognition that reviewers wanted to receive. So they were thinking whether or not it's just being notified about the final decision or receiving some commentary on the quality of their review, that was something that authors really valued. And I think that's kind of a good news story, because that's it requires labor, but I think that improving our communication with our reviewers and just being a bit more thoughtful about those interactions and like the kind of feedback we can give, that's like a free thing. That's something that we can offer reviewers to connect them more to the journal. And from the same report, they were talking about the motivations that people like ranking out of a number of potential motivations for participating as a reviewer. And they actually found there was a lot of extrinsic motivations for folks to participate. So the top ones they had was like a personal interest in the paper, the journal reputation, and their engagement with the scholarly community. So one of the ways you can kind of give recognition and retain potentially your reviewers is to think about how you can connect them with your journal's prestige, with the community of your journal in a way that will further their own goals. So is it possible to name them in the journal? Could they be invited perhaps to eventually join the editorial board and have sort of a progression through roles and a longer term relationship with their journal? That would be really ideal. Next one, Katie. Yeah, and then the other part about retention is this notion of training. So I'm not really sure in general what people's practices are for reviewer training. I'm guessing it's not very in depth beyond sort of like some onboarding. This is just my perception. I could be wrong. But training is a tool that can help you not only to improve the quality of your reviews, but help to mitigate some of those barriers that we were thinking about for early career professionals and people that maybe have less experience. So it could help you to increase the diversity of your journal and improve their relationship with it again. So you can approach this in a number of ways. I got this from an article about developing feedback literacy. So there's like a community-based approach where you could do co-mentorship, co-review and things like that, working directly with other reviewers. There's a skill-based approach where you could do things like give reviewers sort of feedback banks or banks of like examples of reviews, samples of reviews that people have done. And then there's external things. There's PKP School. They have Becoming a Reviewer, which is kind of like an online class you can do. So this is all pretty, could be really helpful for folks who maybe have some less experience with reviews or just want to develop those skills further. And this is sort of a tightrope where you're trying to provide some guidance for people while not making it too onerous for them to do their work and make it too heavy with information. But I think that there's a lot that could be really useful for people with kind of training approaches. Okay, next slide, Katie. Yeah, so just to kind of follow up on that idea, like I'm not going to read this slide out, but I just want to have it for context. So the policy that you create for your reviews is kind of like the public explanation of your processes, right? So, and it's particularly written for the consideration of potential authors. Your guidelines, of course, are for your reviewers to help guide their practice. And then if you go to the next slide, Katie. So you have your policies and your guidelines, and then another kind of document that you may not have thought to include in your process could be like a form or a rubric that is sort of an extension of your guidelines that could provide a bit more guidance for new reviewers and ask sort of a standard set of questions to help frame review considerations. So I think that's just sort of an idea that I wanted to throw out there. And this is from a presentation that our colleague Sarah Severson did. So I thank her for that. And you can go to the next slide, Katie. Okay, yeah, and then just to acknowledge sort of the challenge of workload for everybody. We're really everyone's overwhelmed and working beyond capacity in many cases. I think one creative solution that I wanted to share, Katie and I learned about from Elisa Arbuckle when we did open access and open social scholarship course. And she talked about a journal that she's on hosting sort of what they called like a peer review fest. So it'd be sort of a community-based reviews that take place in person and in the context of a discussion. So how they do it would be like they'd get together in person, review all the the articles for the issue at the same time, and each article receives the attention of two people, but they write it together. And so she said that some of the advantages of this approach was it sort of reminds reviewers that they're part of a community, and enables you to pair sort of experienced reviewers with novice reviewers as to making it sort of like a part of a teaching process. And then the final note that I want to add about AI is on the next slide, is sort of just a note to say, yes, like there are a number of tools being developed for various aspects of the publishing process that can help speed things up. I think where we're at with peer review kind of potential software is that there's nothing really in the current system that could challenge human reviewing yet. So I took this from a 2023 sort of literature review about what's out there. And the first tool, the Review Advisor, is a natural language processing toolkit that when I looked up, it seems to be defunct or sort of like under revision right now. So I guess it's not currently available. The review also made mention of an unnamed neural network tool that would look at word frequencies, readability scores, formatting measures, and things like that to sort of like improve accuracy. I don't even know what that is or how you'd get that. Then the next one is called P Review, which is a software package that sort of can help generate summations of things, look at contribution detection, and identify potential related works, which could support the work of reviewers. This actually made me think of work I did as a research assistant in my grad school, where I was reading articles and generating summation, and I was like summaries of these, and I'm thinking like, oh, my work is outsourced now. Like that could totally be replicated by AI. So it's unfortunate, but that is I couldn't find that online. Like the name is makes it sound like preview, right? P Review, and I didn't find this either. Then there's two tools that are they're kind of like in the decision-making category. So there's peer read that can help predict acceptance or rejection of articles based on the peer review reports. And peer judge is an AI-assisted sentiment detection, which estimates the strength of the praise and the criticism that was written. And they were saying that this could be useful for decisions based on large numbers of review reports and things like that. And then finally, I just want to mention that, of course, like general purpose large language models like ChatGPT could, of course, conceivably have reviewing applications in the sense of like it could suggest grammar corrections or strategies to help authors correct problems that have been identified by reviewers. But of course, reviewers normally agree to keep manuscripts confidential, and so they should not be uploaded to LLMs because they could be saved and incorporated into responses for future questions by other users. So that's sort of like a privacy or I guess intellectual property kind of concern. But yeah, that's all I have for my whirlwind. I guess I've taken a fair bit of time. So Katie, I hope you can do your part in the last little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. That's awesome. So, yeah, the way we planned this is just going to switch gears a little bit. Sarah was talking about sort of the managing reviewers and the workflow, sort of that people side. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about peer review models. I think everyone is kind of familiar with the single anonymous, double anonymous, that kind of thing. So, what I really wanted to focus on today was taking a closer look at open review, because this is something that we've been hearing a lot about, and I was curious, and I hope you're curious too about how people are actually incorporating this, why you might want to consider it, what are some of the drawbacks, that kind of stuff. So, in general, open peer review, it really seeks to bring more accountability and transparency to the process. And there's a lot of different ways that this can be done. So I've listed a few of the processes here from the kind of survey that I did of journals that are conducting open peer review. there's no one consistent approach. It's really like journal to journal, it's quite different. Sometimes the actual review content is published, sometimes there's just the different versions are published, sometimes it's still anonymous, but the comments are posted, and just a real range of approaches. So some of the pros, there's quite a long list here. This is, I think, why we hear people talking about open peer review so much, because a lot of people are cognizant of some of the biases and issues with lack of transparency or accountability that may come up, and they see that open peer review may be a solution to that. Another really big advantage with open peer review is that often it allows you to get this research content out to the general public quicker, and then it can be oh, sorry, someone's in the waiting room, and then it can be reviewed and updated as the process continues, but then there is less of a lag to see that research publicly. So that's definitely an advantage, as well as the recognition piece and some training and that kind of stuff. So some of the cons, though, that are important to consider as well is that you might not get as much critical comments because people don't want to, publicly put that out there. That might be holding them back a little bit. They're also, early career reviewers might not want to, you know, risk going out there and saying something against someone that may retaliate, or, just might be nervous about all of that kind of stuff. And then this can just lead to potentially some researchers just flat out saying no. So there is that side as well. Oop. Oh, sorry, I've clicked way too many times. Okay. So what I really wanted to do is show a couple of examples of how some journals are handling open peer review and what that looks like. So I will say when I was doing this kind of scan to find journals that are doing open peer review, there was a lot less than I expected, and it was quite difficult to find journals doing this. So maybe that might speak to something. I'm not sure. Maybe it's new, or maybe it's more labor intensive um, than the anonymous, double and single anonymous. So the first one is this Royal Society. Ooh, so they call it transparent peer review, um, where they actually will show in the article, they will include the comments as well as the different versions. So they're really trying to make the entire process open. I did want to show this as well because it is important to consider if you do open peer review that you should uh, make sure that you think about the licensing of the reviews and having the reviewers agree to a open license. So I will show what this looks like in practice. So you've got your article here, and then right here, you can just look at the review history. So this journal is actually using the Web of Science platform to post the review history, but it is, very nice and clear. You get to see in the first round, you can see the full reviewer reports, as well as the letter that is then sent to the author. And everything is disclosed through both steps of the way. So this is one way that it can look. I also think, kind of linking back to what Sarah was saying, this, even looking at these things can be really useful um, training for reviewers and potentially new editors and stuff like that to see how the process is handled. Another way, this is actually an OJS journal, is the Journal of Storms and Meteorology. So the difference between the Royal Society and this one is that the reviewers are kept anonymous in this example, which can kind of alleviate some of those cons that I talked about before. But in this, the E-Journal of Severe Storms and Meteorology, they actually do make the reviews the reviewer's name is included. However, when they show the article, it's a little less um, transparent to see that it's been an open review process. So that's something that, maybe if this is something that you were going to consider doing with your journal, want to make it a little bit more transparent. The only way that I figured this one out was because it was in the reviewer guidelines. But the way that they include their open reviews is simply appending them at the end to the end of the journal article. So with this one, you don't get to see the same process, so you don't get to see the different versions and stuff like that. But you do get to see, the journal review, or sorry, the article reviewer gets their name included. That might be recognition that they like to see. And then you get to see their comments, as well as the blue is the author's feedback on those comments. So that is another approach. Just gonna close some of these. The last approach that I wanted to talk about is a community or crowdsourced approach to review. So with this journal, they actually have sort of a hybrid review process where they do a pre-review that involves the editor as well as a reviewer, an expert reviewer looking at the contributions. But after that, they do post the new updated version of the article to they have a forum here that they use, but you know, out there publicly or to a specific community, and allow a certain amount of time for just anyone to, well, people in that community to comment on and provide feedback before that final version of the article is then published in the journal. So that's another way. So you're getting kind of even an extra step of review with this method. And the last thing that I wanted to say is shout out to our previous Lunch and Learn last month, where our colleague Emily actually went through in OJS how to do different versions of articles and post-production changes. So if you are interested in pursuing open review and are curious how to actually do that in OJS and what it could look like to have, say, the version 1 right on that article landing page, the version 2, that kind of stuff all posted there, that video will take you through the process. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to mention, little self-explanatory, but it's very important to follow clear, transparent guidelines to whatever approach to peer review you decide to do. And I just put a link here, as well as just some of the high level ethical guidelines from the um, community of publication ethics. Has a lot of really good documentation, um, training documents, um, guidelines on how to communicate your peer review processes on your journal website, and all of that kind of stuff. So definitely recommend that you check those out. And there is just at the end a further readings. So that's where you can find all of the links that Sarah and I have talked about, and we will share that um, after to everyone that registered for the session. So that's all for me. I'm going to stop recording, and then if anyone has questions, we can discuss those.